Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy and I'm so happy you're here. If this is your first time stopping by, welcome, and I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. If you like these projects, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think, and now without further ado, let's get started. I totally spit. Dang it! I thought I was going to be perfect. For this Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to be using 3 cat scratching boards, 4 packages of the nautical rope, and then 1 package, and it wasn't even a full package, of the white poly rope. And all we're going to do is glue the long ends of each of these boards together with our hot glue. And you could add E6000 to this, but I don't think you really need it because we're going to be wrapping it with our nautical rope, and it really keeps it all together and snug as a bug in a rug. So originally I had planned to cover this portion with some nautical rope as well, but I really like the texture of these boards, so I'm just going to leave it open the way it is, and it's very close to the color of the rope also, so I think it works out perfectly. And these are made out of a corrugated cardboard, so they're pretty heavy duty and they're nice and flat, so whatever you put on top of it is not going to be wibbly wobbly. So all we're going to do is start with our nautical rope on the back side of our tray, and then we're going to hot glue that down all the way around, and then when we get back to the beginning, we're going to make a hard left with our rope, add some more hot glue, and then just go about our business. So we're going to do a total of 7 rows of the nautical rope. And when I get to each of the corners of my tray and I glue that down, I'm going to be really mindful not to make it too tight so that the walls of our tray doesn't start going inwards, if that makes sense. And then once you get to the end of your nautical rope, you're going to butt up the next roll right up against it. And sometimes that will show if it frays. So what I found is that if you just add some hot glue to the middle of those 3 strands of the rope and then just pinch it together, and that connection will kind of be hidden in your tray. And then once we get to the 7th row of rope, we'll make a little hill on each side that will serve as our handles. And then I went to the end of the other handle and cut off my rope so it wouldn't be too noticeable. And I added a little bit more hot glue there, but we're going to end up reinforcing this with some string, so you'll see that in a second. But then this way the handles can actually be used. So now we're going to start adding our poly rope at the same place in the back where I started the nautical rope. So all of those transitions to the next row will kind of be hidden and in the back. You can still place this on a coffee table and have both sides showing, but the front side is just a little prettier because the back side will have some wavy lines of rope. So just have that prettier side facing toward your couch. So then I'm going to do a total of 3 rows of my poly rope, and I found that if you kind of push down your glue instead of making a bead, because this is pretty skinny, you won't have as much seepage, but it'll still stay in place. And then again, I'm going to finish up on the back side of my tray and hot glue that down and then cut the extra off. And you could be done at this point, but I wanted to make sure that the poly rope stays attached since it's super slippery. And I don't think the hot glue will stay in place without some additional support, but look how pretty this is just the way it is. I'm still not going to trust those handles, so when I pick it up, I'm going to be grabbing the base and not those handles. So now I'm just going to take a large-eyed needle and some white string, and I'll just start sewing through the top of the 2nd row of rope and wrap it around the top of the poly rope. And I'm just making stitches about 1 inch apart, and when I pull it through, I'm kind of pulling it pretty tight so that that poly rope stays in place. So once I finished wrapping my entire tray, I ended in a corner and then tied a knot connecting those two pieces of string. And since I always cut more than I need, I had an opportunity to add some pretty beads to our tray. And I had a sweet viewer and member of the Dollar Tree Sparrow's Nest on Facebook mention, and she even left the link for some wooden beads by Pinecraft, and you can get 300 of them in 3 different sizes for only $11.99. But, oh, sorry, Megan, I did it again. Anyway, once you order them, if you leave them feedback, they'll send you another 300 beads for free. So she was kind enough to share that in our Dollar Tree group, and so I wanted to share that with you. So I ordered those, and sure enough, I got my second set of 300 beads for free. So thank you for that tip, Heather. And I will leave a link to those beads in the description box below. So now to catch up with what we're doing on our tray, I just fed on my beads to those extra pieces of string, and then I made a tassel by wrapping it around my hand 25 times, and then I added a piece of string at the top and then another piece about a quarter of the way down and just wrapped that around to make it look like a tassel. And then I cut apart my loops at the bottom and gave it a haircut so it would be nice and even. And then I'm going to tie that to the bottom of my beads. And I like the look of the raw wood, but it was a little bit too yellow, so I wanted to lighten that up using some white chalk paint. And then I'm also going to take a home sign from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to do the same thing with the white chalk paint just to lighten it up and it's not so brown. So I'm just giving it a little bit of a whitewash look by painting it on and then wiping it off. And that way the wood grain will still show through, but it's a little bit lighter. Then I was going to use my Waverly Wax in Antique to give it a distressing around the edges, but then I remembered another sweet viewer that had recommended using these upholstery pins from the Dollar Tree, and that made super fast work of this. And then on my little heart at the end, I am going to use my Waverly Wax in Antique just to make that a little bit different and bring some more wood tone into this piece. So now I'm going to take a couple of Dollar Tree books and some pretty ribbon that I found in the wrapping paper section, and I'm just going to pull apart my books, and look away if this hurts your heart because it is a little bit hard to do, but I knew it was going to be really pretty and this is probably not going to get read. So I'm just going to pull it apart, and on my thicker book I'm going to slice that down the spine so that I have 3 different thicknesses. And then when I put it together, it'll be all uneven and cutie patootie. So after I get them all separated, I'm going to take my Waverly Wax in Antique and I'll add some water to it. And I'm just going to brush that all over the fronts and backs and get it all scrunchy, and the water will automatically make it crinkly, but I'm going to take my hand and make it even more wrinkled so that it looks nice and distressed. And when I was done, I decided that it was a little bit too dark, so I'm going to go back in with one more layer of white chalk paint just to lighten it up a little bit. But then I'm going to take my ribbon and I'm going to make a sweet little bow, and then using some baby's breath from Walmart, I'm just going to tuck a little piece inside and it's done. And then I knew I also wanted to add some coasters to my tray, and so I'm going to be using some Dollar Tree coasters, and I had planned to paint them and use a stencil on them. So instead we're going to make this even easier, and I have 2 of them that says do what you love, love what you do, and then the other 2 say today is a good day to have a great day. And I really didn't even look at these too closely when I bought them because I had in mind what I was going to do with them. So you just want to take your craft knife and go along the back side to get that outer wrapping off, and then it's done. So anyway, I'm going to add some more baby's breath from Walmart to these candle holders that I made in another video, and I'll have that linked in the description box below, and I'll have it fly by right now too. But I love this tray so much, and the coasters were just so perfect and the perfect colors. I just think this is such a pretty vignette, and it's so farmhouse looking or rustic or whatever you want to call it. We've even got a built-in beaded garland. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. For this Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to be using a muffin tray, some Spanish moss, some styrofoam eggs and moss bunnies, some ribbon, and a chalkboard tag. So the first thing I'm going to do is just paint my muffin tin, and I'm going to paint it on the front and on the back and get it all nicely covered and pretty solid. So I'm going to have to give this a couple of coats. And then I'm going to take my black paint pen that I get from Walmart, and I'm going to give this the enamel wear look by just going along those lines. And I always wait to do those chippy marks that you see in authentic enamel wear until after I get my basic lines down, because I always seem to go off the rails and out of bounds, and so I'll turn those into those chippy marks. And then there's a hole at the top and bottom of my muffin pan, so I'm going to make some lines around those as well so that it looks like it's worn, and those would be the normal places where you would see some wear and tear. So I decided I wanted this piece to hang vertically, so I'm going to take some hot glue and stick a little bit of Spanish moss into 3 of my openings, and then I'm going to start painting the pieces that are going to go inside. So for the eggs, I'm going to take off the sweet little bows, and then I'm going to take them off of their skewers so that I can paint the bottom of them, and then I'll place them back on the skewer to paint the rest of them. And I'm going to paint 2 in my chalk paint in white, and then 2 in the super pretty blue, which is called Crystal, also by Waverly. And then I'm just going to set those out to dry. So now I'm going to take my foam bunnies that are covered in moss, and they were a little bit too dark for me and what I wanted for this piece. So I'm going to poke a little skewer into their bellies, ouchie, and then I'm going to take my white chalk paint and lighten those up. And I think it looks so pretty because it almost makes the moss look like hair of the bunnies. So I'm just going to paint them completely white and then poke it into the styrofoam to dry as well. So now that my eggs are dry, I'm going to get them a little speckled up, and so my sweet friend Linda at Faith Chick 777 DIY by Design taught me how to do this in a better way so that there's not so many drippies, and so you just don't want to make it too thin so that it drips once you speckle everything up. So I just took my fan brush and just tapped it on there, and it worked out perfectly. So thank you, Linda. So now I'm going to take a piece of gingham ribbon, and I'm going to tie some knots at the sides and then hot glue that to the front of my pan. And I wanted the ribbon to show from the front, but when you hang it, it will kind of come up towards the bottom. It'll kind of stick out. So I did have to put some double-sided tape to keep that down against the wall. So if you don't want it to do that and you don't want to use double-sided tape, just put those ribbons toward the back. So then I have these Dollar Tree stickers, and they have been really having a good inventory of stickers, but I just took the little clock one and I'm going to attach it to one of those square blocks from the Crafter's Square. And then I took some sheer fabric and I'm going to hot glue that into that little opening. And I would recommend on this one, I probably shouldn't tell you because now you're going to see it, but instead of putting that clock up in the right top left or either one of the tops, I would move it down a little bit because to me it kind of looks like an eyeball. But anyway, I wanted to lighten it up because there was a little bit too much orange, so I just took some chalk paint and painted it on there and let it dry just a little bit and then wiped it off so that it was nice and soft. And then I'm going to glue that right on top of that fabric. And then I'm going to do some more to that in a minute. But first I'm going to figure out my placement of where I want everything. And then I'm going to start gluing those in. And in one of the openings, I took some netting from a bag of rocks from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to mushy that up and then hot glue that in there as well because I wanted different textures and looks, but I wanted a light palette. So I'm just going to hot glue that in there, and then I'll take my blue egg and hot glue that down. And then again, I'm going to add some more to that in a second, and then just hot glued all of my other pieces into place. And this was such a fun project because it was like doing a mini DIY in each of those little sections. So I kept adding to and taking away until I got it to where I liked it. And of course, if you don't have everything that I'm using here, just use what you have and make it your own. So I have been wanting to use these Dollar Tree rub-ons forever, and this was the perfect project to use it on. There's a little slice that had some old newspaper, and so I'm just going to take some of that and rub it on to my tin, but I don't want it to be completely solid. I want it to be like broken up and ripped, just to give it some additional aging and cuteness. And then there was another one that was a circle, and I still wasn't all the way happy with my clock, and so I'm going to pull that greenery out of there because it was a little bit too lime green. And then I'm going to cover it with some more of those rub-ons, and just it turns out so pretty. So then I took our little chalkboard tag, and I'm going to use a white paint pen to write Hello Spring, and I just wrote hello in a cursive writing and then spring in just capital letters. And I'm going to hot glue that right to the top area of our muffin tin. But if you don't want to make this specifically for spring, you could write farm fresh eggs or welcome to the kitchen or whatever suits your fancy and goes with whatever you've filled your muffin tin with. And then this is where I'm just going to layer on some of those rub-ons onto my clock just to get rid of that orangey and yellowy color. And this is also when I'm going to take out that baby's breath because I noticed it was a little too bright. And then I found some really pretty blue butterfly stickers at the Dollar Tree. And because it was a little bit off on that color, I'm going to paint that with some more crystal and add that at the very end. And once my little chalkboard sign was completely dry, I took some sandpaper and roughed that up so that it would look a little more distressed and rusticy to go with everything else. So now I'm going to make a scrappy bow for the top of our muffin tin, and I just cut strips of some Dollar Tree burlap and gingham ribbon, and I had some white scraps and then some more of that wrapping paper ribbon, which is so pretty. It looks like a linen burlap mixture. It's just really pretty. And then some of the pretty striped ribbon. And this is the time that you would want to dovetail the ends because it's a little bit more difficult when it's all put together. So do as I say and not as I do. And then I'm going to wrap that with some jute twine so that that can be part of our little bow, and I'll attach that to the top left of our muffin tin. And here it is all finished, and I think this turned out so pretty and soft, and I think this could be pulled into a vintage or shabby style and not just for farmhouse. I meant for this to be a super quick and easy DIY to put between our two more advanced projects, but it turned out even cuter than what I had in my brain. I love it, and I hope you like it too. For this Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to start out with 4 of the 24-inch boards, and I didn't have 4 of the same kind, but that's okay. The backs all look the same. And then I'm going to take my Cricut spatula, and remember I told you that some of the boards don't have that paper that comes up super easily? Well, these were 3 of them that don't come up at all, so you'll want to paint the back of it. I didn't because I'm conserving paint, but I'm just going to remove all of the staples, and most of those are going to be cut away so you won't see them. But to put my 4 boards together, I'm going to use the super large craft sticks from Walmart and just gob a bunch of glue on there to keep those attached, and I'm going to end up reinforcing it even more once I get this cut out so that my boards don't come apart. And then to make a circle, I'm going to take a pencil and tie a string to it, and then I'll find the center of my square boards and then tap a small nail right in between there, tie the other end of the string onto that nail, and then make a full circle all the way around. And then I'm going to take this outside and cut my circle using my new Milwaukee jigsaw that Michael J got for me from Home Depot. I'll have this listed in my Amazon store, and it's about $100, but oh my goodness, it works so well. And I guess because it had a new blade, it just cut like butter. And so for a newbie like me, I was pretty proud of myself for making that circle. Of course, Michael J was supervising and cheering me on, and even though it wasn't perfect, I was able to sand down any areas where I didn't quite stay on my pencil line. And I'm cutting right through those craft sticks on the back, so you'll just want to go a little slower in those areas. So now I'm going to paint a black stripe across our circle, and I put it a little bit higher than perfectly centered. So I took some painter's tape to mask that off, and it's about a 5-inch stripe. I was kind of eyeballing it, but I did use a ruler to make sure that it was even all the way across. And then we'll paint that using our Waverly chalk paint in ink. And then once that's completely dry, we'll retape it on the inside of our stripe and paint the outsides white. So now that our white paint is completely dry, I'm going to go back in with some Waverly wax in antique and going horizontally so that it looks like wood grain. I'm just going to paint that on there, and then using a dry towel, I'm going to wipe it off so that it gives it that wood look. And in real life, this really does look like wood. And the good thing is that where we place those boards together, the wax kind of builds up in between there, so it looks like a shiplap or plank look. And I'm going to make sure to brush those edges and make that a little bit darker so that it gives it some definition. And when I painted with my wax, I didn't quite hit all of the white at those lines, so you can see a teeny tiny white line against my black stripe. I didn't mean to do that, but I think it looks really pretty. So now we're going to take this adorable little pink truck from the Dollar Tree, and using a super sharp craft knife, we're going to cut out the goodies from the back of the bed and just give it some muscle. And if you slow down on the first couple of cuts, you'll have a little valley that your blade will follow as you keep cutting. So there's really no need to use a straight edge, which that always moves on me since I'm not strong enough to hold it down with one hand. And I'm going to let this clip play so you can see exactly how many swipes it takes. It's in double time, so it's going twice as fast. But this way you can see exactly just how many swipes it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. No, to get your stuff out of the back of this truck. So now that our truck is unloaded, I'm going to pull off the fenders using my Cricut spatula, and I'm going to try and get some of that glittery paper off just because I want to make sure that there's a good adhesion between the hot glue and when I put my fenders back on. We're going to be using the other side of the truck so that it's nice and flat, and it'll be perfect for our painted surface, which we are going to buffalo check. Woohoo! So once I get everything all sanded and smooth, I'm going to take my white chalk paint and paint my entire truck, including the fenders, and I want to make sure to get all of the edges at the very beginning. And then I'm going to take my painter's tape and starting right in the middle or somewhere around the middle, it doesn't really matter where, and then I'll put 2 more pieces right next to it. And then once I get that third piece down, I'm going to pull up that second piece because that's just our spacer. And then I'll place that next to that third piece and then do the same thing until I go all the way off of the edge of my truck. And then I'm going to take my chalk paint in silver lining and I'm going to paint those stripes, and then I'll pull off the tape. So once that paint is completely dry, we're going to do the exact same thing going horizontally, and we're going to leave the tape on this time. I don't have to do the bottom because I'm going to be painting my tires black, so that's why there's only a couple of pieces on this go round. And then once this paint dries, I'm going to use some more tape and go down vertically over the first places where I had originally placed my tape. So it'll be over the white areas. And then for each of the exposed squares, I'm going to use my black chalk paint and fill those all in. And then we get a tape reveal. Well, you can see that I didn't exactly line up my painter's tape perfectly, but that's okay. I don't think it's really that noticeable. So now I'm going to mark where my tires are going to go by putting my fenders, which I left white, on top of the truck and then just outlined it. And then I'm just going to use my Waverly chalk paint and ink to fill those in. So then to make the wheels inside the tires, you're just going to want to use something round that looks about the right size, and then I just mark that with a pencil, and then I'm going to fill that in with a white paint pen. And then I'm going to scratch that up so that it doesn't look too new and it looks like my truck is a little bit old and worn as well. And I'll put my fenders back on, and then I'm also going to take some sandpaper and sand everything down and get it all nicely distressed, and then it's ready to fill. So then I use my Silhouette Cameo 3 to cut out the word welcome, and I'll have all of my Frisco craft links for the vinyl and transfer tape I'm using in the description box below. And I'm using the font Forestia Script. I don't know if that's how you say it, but that's from defont.com. And I'll also have this decal available in our Etsy shop, and it will also be available to our Patreon members of the Dove's Nest and the Sparrow's Nest. And if you'd like more information on how you can become a Patreon member, there's a link in the description box below that you can click on to get more information. And remember, if you don't have a cutting machine, you can print this out and use the transfer method to apply it to your project using paint. It's pretty big, so you will have to use a couple of pieces of copy paper and tape it together, but it's so worth it. Also, I think I forgot to give a shout out to our new Patreon member, Ashley Mitchell, in our last batch of shout outs. So if I did, I'm sorry, Ashley, but thank you so much for your sweet support. So after I got everything weeded and all of that extra adhesive vinyl taken off of my decal, I'm going to put my transfer tape on top, and then I'm going to pull off that backing sheet, and then I'll apply it to my wood board. And I'm using a Dollar Tree chopper to use as a squeegee because this is so large. And because a portion of it is going to be on that wax, you kind of have to baby it on there because it doesn't want to stick right away. And I didn't let it completely dry. So then I'm going to take some lamb's ear from Walmart, and I get this for $2 a bundle. And I'm just going to take 2 pieces and stack those on top of each other and hot glue those down. And I like to have the leaves facing upward so you can see that pretty texture on them. You can't get them all turned around, but some of them it does help. And if you did get them all around, I guess that wouldn't be very natural looking anyway. So I'm going to be using my silicone mask applicator to push that into the hot glue, and I want to make sure it has a super good hold. And then I'm going to take some burlap ribbon with the lace on it from the Dollar Tree, and using the fold over method, I'm going to do 4 loops on each side, and then I'll make 1 big loop at the bottom. And once we cut those apart, that's going to be our 2 tails. And then I'm going to make teeny tiny little snips on both sides of my bow, and then feed my chenille stem into there so that when I move my loops around and foof it up, it's going to be easier to turn and twist and make it all nice and perky. And then I'm going to dovetail my ends of my tails, and then I'm going to feed that through our lamb's ear. So then to hang this, I'm going to use a scrap piece of chenille stem and just fold that over in half and twist it at the bottom and hot glue that on there. And then I always add a little piece of ribbon or linen or something to go over the top of that chenille stem so there's no pokey parts and it won't mess up your wall. Again, you want to probably paint this so that it's not so ugly on the back, but I'm just out of paint and I'm having a hard time finding some at the Walmart. So now we're going to start filling our little truck bed. And my friend Kelly in Texas had requested that I do something for all seasons with the little truck and putting things in the bed. So this was my take. And I'm first going to take some of these little flower cutouts from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just putting 2 together and drawing a line where my truck bed is, because I want that back portion to be able to slide into the bed and then have all the pretties hanging out and over the side of the truck. So I took some pretty pink and green flowers and just started hot gluing those everywhere over that line, and had some small little white ones poking out. Just have fun with this and use whatever colors you're using in your decor. And once I'm done with a season, I put that away and put it in storage. So these were just items I had kind of laying around. So I ended up being able to come up with 7 different seasonal loads, I guess you would call them. And so I'm going to do a Valentine's Day one by using a heart pick, and I just took one of those styrofoam hearts and cut it in half, and then I'm going to use some foam mounting tape from the Dollar Tree to lift that up so that I can go over the side of my truck, and I'll have that little gap in between the heart and the wood piece, so it'll still be able to slide right over and into the truck bed. And then for Christmas, since I put all of my Christmas stuff away, I only had this little red truck, so I'm going to use my Cricut spatula to pull off the Christmas tree. And there was a little piece of paint that came off when I pulled it up, but I knew that was going to be covered by the back of our truck, so I just went ahead and left it so I didn't have to repaint and lose that pretty glittery snow that was already on it. So I'm just going to add some Jenga pieces to make it be able to lay over and stay in place once I apply this to my board, because we're going to be lifting it away from the board anyway. So I'm going to have lifters, but this way it'll keep my Christmas tree in place. And then I'm going to do the same thing with some fall picks and cut my pumpkins in half, add some fall leaves and pine cones, just being mindful to keep everything that's glued down above the line, but still having some items hang over that line so that it hangs over the side of my truck. So now for our summer truckload, I'm going to be using some of these sweet little sunflowers. I only had one pack, and these are from Dollar Tree. So I'm going to use some Dollar Tree greenery to kind of fill in those blank areas. And I'm just going to pull apart a couple of leaves and then glue those together and place those around the outside areas and just throughout. And then I'll fill that in with my sunflowers. And then I took some 5/8 inch gingham ribbon from the Dollar Tree, made a sweet little bow, and placed that in the middle of our summer load. So for 4th of July, I really had nothing to use. I did find these scatter foam stars that I kept out from Christmas, and I guess you can use stars at any time. I think I just overlooked them and didn't put them away. So I'm going to place these just randomly and layer them. And then I should have really painted the back wood part so that that didn't peek through. And so a little of that is showing. So to cover it up, I'm just going to use some curly ribbon that I had for wrapping presents. And I'm just using red, white, and blue. And then I'll make that all curly cued and stick that around so that it covers up a little bit of that wood. And then I had some of the red wire from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to make curly cues on a couple of those and take a couple of the stars and poke those into the top and then have those coming out kind of like little fireworks. I don't know. I didn't have a lot to work with, but I think it still came out pretty cute. So now for our Easter truckload, and this is my favorite. I ran out of the flower wood cutouts, so I'm going to be using 2 of these Christmas ornaments from Dollar Tree, and it worked out perfectly because I wanted them to look like the hills at Calvary. So I turned them sideways and glued them together to use as our base, and then I painted them with my truffle chalk paint and blended in some black and white to give them a little depth and shading. And then I made a cross using the Jenga pieces from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to glue those together with some hot glue and some super glue gel. And to make it look more solid, like a solid piece, I added some Dollar Tree spackle and just smushed it over the cross with my finger. And then I had some sweet visitors who had just gotten out of the swimming pool and wanted to say hi. So you know, our granddaughter Kaden, and then my adorable niece Karis, she's my sister's baby bonus, and then of course Carson. So they just wanted to say hi. So then after my spackle dried, I'm just going to use my sanding sponge and sand that down a little bit. And then I'm going to use some skinny sticks that I got from Walmart, and I'm just going to cut those down and make 2 smaller crosses. And then using my Waverly Wax and Antique, I'm going to stain all 3 crosses. And I made one a little bit lighter, and I should have really made all of them lighter because against my dark wood board, it's a little bit harder to see, but if you know what it is, you know what it is. So now I'm going to take a strip of some white t-shirt that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to wrap that around my cross, and I'll hot glue that on the back, on both sides, and then in the front to hold that down. And then I'll cut it down to make it the right length that I want it to hang at. And then I'm going to take my cross and I'm going to glue that to my mountains, and it'll be right at that line where I'm going to put it in the back of my truck. And then I'll add my other 2 crosses on each side, and I'll kind of put those a little bit at an angle. And then I'm going to add another Jenga piece to make sure that this sits completely level when I put it in the back of the truck. And then I'll go ahead and add my other Jenga pieces so that my truck is lifted from the back of my board. And then I'm going to take some Spanish moss and add that to the bottom, and that's going to kind of hang over the side of our truck. And here it is, all finished, and oh my gosh, I'm thinking this is in my top 10 all-time favorites. I love, love, love how this turned out, and it's such a nice, big, substantial piece. It's almost about 2 feet across, and I ended up spending a total of $10 with the empty truck bed. We did have a little fender bender because I dropped it when I was trying to hang it up, and it all held together because of that extra support in the back. So yay team! But I absolutely love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. I hope you enjoyed all of these projects, and if you did, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button and the bell right next to it so that you know every time I've got a new video out. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Etsy, Patreon. Whew, goodness, there's a lot to keep up with. I hope you're enjoying this Easter season. As always, have a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye! Why does my voice go up so high on that part?